to you.
Lie to represent you. Okay.
Where's the money?
Not telling you.
Hey, the identity is wrong. I need to tell Kamran.
It's not your.
What?
It's Ben and Christina.
Why didn't you tell us you were contracting for the other party?
What should I tell you? You didn't ask. There is nothing in the law that says that I should disclose the information to you. The losses is not my problem.
There is a presumption in both English and Malaysian law that mere silence does not amount to misrepresentation. Given that duty of disclosure falls under this umbrella, there exists a general rule in both jurisdictions that the failure by the contractee to disclose a material fact which might influence the mind of a prudent contractor does not give the right to avoid the contract. This viewpoint is encapsulated in Bradford 3rd Equitable Benefit Building Society and Borders, where Viscount Mon stated that mere silence, however morally wrong, will not support an action of deceit. The main reasoning behind this principle was that requiring full disclosure goes against the notion fundamental in market economies, which is that parties are expected to look after their own interests and to bargain to obtain the best terms which they can for themselves. Meanwhile, the main issue many have with this general rule is that it allows people to enter into contracts without knowing the full facts of the agreement, as there cannot fully be consensus ad idem between the parties until all the facts are known. However, the law is not completely one-sided, and the courts have found that if the contractee goes beyond mere silence, they may be held liable for misrepresentation. An example of this is the case of Spice Girls and Aprila World Service, where courts found the existence of misrepresentation due to the fact that one party had actively sought to conceal a defect in the subject matter of the contract from the other party. Besides that, there are certain categories such as contracts uberrima fide or contracts of the utmost good faith, where a duty of disclosure is in fact imposed on the parties to the contract. One example of such contracts are contracts of insurance, where the insured is subject to a duty to disclose all facts which a reasonable or prudent insurer would regard as material to his decision to enter into the particular contract of insurance. These exceptions and more will be discussed later in greater detail by my colleague Radhika. Clearly, there's a conflict between protecting the ability of the parties to bargain to obtain the best terms which they can for themselves and preserving fairness and consensus ad idem. As a result, the main question we hope to answer throughout this presentation is whether the law concerned with duty to disclose in both English and Malaysian law adequately protects the interests of both parties to the contract.
The general rule is that English law does not recognize the existence of a duty to disclose material facts, known to one party but not to the other, which is shown in the case of Keats and Cardigan. The rule stems from the doctrine of caveat emptor, which means buyers should be aware. Ruskin Moore stated in Bradford Third Equitable Benefit Building, Society and Borders, mere silence, however morally wrong, will not support an action of deceit. Something more than silence is needed to represent a fact. In this case, it also allows conduct or the circumstances of the case to be inferred. For example, Nords can disclose material facts. Professor Freed justified why there is no duty of disclosure under English law. He used this analogy: an oil company has made extensive geological surveys seeking to identify possible oil and gas reserves. These surveys are extremely expensive. Having identified one promising site, the oil company, acting through a broker, buys a large tract of land from its prosperous farmer, relieving nothing about the surveys, its purpose, or even its density. The price paid is the going price for the farmland, of the quality of the region. From this analogy, he gives point why there's no duty of disclosure. Firstly, there's no compensation for the buyer to give away such valuable information, which deprive him unfairly of his valuable information. To provide a disincentive such information and to unjustly enrich the seller. In this analogy, it was the surveys. Second is that the contractual obligations are generally voluntarily assumed by the parties who are looking for the best bargain possible. The notion of individualism, parties are expected to look after their own interests and to bargain to obtain the best terms which they can for themselves. Lastly, the plug-in argument. The courts have to decide when parties actually have to disclose their information. There will be too many cases for the courts to handle. Many see this general rule as unfair due to the fact that it allows people to enter contracts without knowing the full facts of the agreement. However, strong arguments can be adduced to support the recognition of a duty of disclosure in certain cases, which are the exceptions of the general rule.
Hello, today I will speak on the exceptions that exist within the English position duty of disclosure. One large exception which encompasses a number of contractual relationships is that of contracts of overridden faith, also known as contracts of utmost good faith. Contracts of utmost good faith are contracts where the material facts lie within the knowledge of one party, and failure to disclose that makes the contract voidable. Insurance contracts are examples of contracts of utmost good faith. Here, the insured has a duty to disclose all facts which a reasonable or prudent insurer would regard as material to the risk assessment. Statutory provision on this duty may also be found in the case of Section 18, subsection 2 of the Marine Insurance Act 1906, which says that a failure to disclose will entitle the insurer to avoid the contract and deny claims under it. There has, however, been widespread criticism of the duty of disclosure in insurance contracts in specific. It is said that the application of this rule, with the insurer expected to tell insurers everything he knows and the insurers alone getting to decide what is pertinent to their risk assessment, has resulted in oppressive results. To compound things, the duty to disclose by the insured is absolute and can be breached without any intentional wrongdoing or negligence. An example of a case which illustrates this disparity in power is the case of Bank Financier and Westgate Insurance Co. Limited, where the broker who could not be trusted was not disclosed as such by the insurance company. The plaintiffs sued and the court found in favor of them but gave them little to no remedy. The insurers and the insured were treated unevenly, the latter being penalized severely, but the insurer being able to get away scot-free. Statutory provisions have also been prepared to protect buyers from vendors withholding information and allowed for there to be a duty to disclose where necessary. This is seen in Section 14, subsection 3 of the Sale of Goods Act 1979, which states that business sellers are under a duty to ensure that goods are fit for the buyer's purpose, provided that the seller knows or should have known of the buyer's purpose and that it was reasonable for the buyer to rely on the seller. This shows that the vendor must disclose information to ensure that the goods purchased are as far within the buyer's purpose as possible. Furthermore, there is a responsibility of dealers in financial services to make customers aware of certain information. This is seen in the Companies Act 1985, which elucidates that a prospectus issued to the public inviting subscription for shares must contain information on a large number of points, all of which are specified in the Act, and matters obvious to influence a person intending to buy shares. Section 44, subsection 1 of the Consumer Credit Act 1974 also states that advertisements offering to supply credit for loan to customers must comply with regulations designed to ensure the fair and reasonably comprehensive indication of the nature of the credit or hire facilities offered by the advisor and their true cost to the person using them. Contracts subject to financial ombudsman is another exception to the general position of English law. It is said that the general role of the financial ombudsman is in resolving contractual disputes. A large share of the disputes reported are that of contracts made with inadequate information, such as mortgage endowment policies. This lack of advice and information has resulted in many injustice for uneducated and low-skilled people. The position of the financial ombudsman is laid out in the Financial Services Act 1986, which states that the service of the financial ombudsman makes it clear that certain duties of disclosure exist within the financial transactions, insurance, mortgage, consumer credit, and investment-related activities. There must be appropriate information as well as appropriate advice when it comes to this sort of thing. Employment contracts are another type of contract which calls for a limited duty of disclosure. In this case, employers must advise their employees on safety matters and give proper instructions on how to adopt safe methods at work. The employer must also keep employees informed of any changes in their terms of contract of employment, such as alterations in the occupational pension scheme.
The next exception to there being no duty of disclosure is where there is active concealment of a defect of goods to be sold. The case of Snyder and Heath rules that this as a fact that the buyer agreed to buy a ship to be taken with all faults. The bottom of the ship was worn out. The captain attempted to conceal this by removing the ship from the dry dock and kept it afloat until the sail was over. The court allowed the buyer to rescind. Another exception in where the suppression of material facts render a true statement false. This is seen in the case of Dimmock and Hallett, where the seller of the land had represented that all farms on the land were fully let, but failed to inform the purchaser that the tenants have given notice to quit. The court allowed rescission of the contract. Furthermore, an exception exists when there is a partial non-disclosure. Here, the case of Peake and Gurney states that half a truth will sometimes amount to real falsehood, a positive misrepresentation. One more exception is present when it is held that a literary true statement may be misleading if the maker does not disclose all relevant information. The case of Knott's patent brick and Tao, Cole and Butler illustrates this, as the facts show the purchaser saying he was not aware of the existence of a fact, but failed to state that he had not made any checks to verify his belief. The court held that there was a misrepresentation. This exception is also covered by statute in the form of Trade Descriptions Act 1968, Section 1, and the Consumer Protection Act 1987, Section 20, which makes it an offence for a party to give misleading information about the subject of the matter of the contract. The court also ruled that there is a duty to disclose a change in circumstances which render a representation made in truth but which subsequently, before the conclusion of the contract, to the knowledge of the maker becomes false. The case of this point is the case of Reeve and O. Flanagan, where the vendor of a medical practice represented its value at £2,000 at the start of the negotiations, but failed to mention that the practice was worthless at the time of the sale of a practice 5 months later. The court held that it was unlawful to omit the change, as a representation made as a matter of inducement to enter into a contract is to be treated as a continuing representation. There are similarities and differences where we compare the English positions to the Malaysian positions when imposing a responsibility to disclose any information known to one contracting party but not the other during the process of negotiation. one of the parallel positions under the Malaysian position, the misled party who wants to rescind the contract has a duty to exercise ordinary diligence when making a contract. Thus, this duty corresponds with the English doctrine, caveat emptor. Now we are going to discuss the disparity between English and Malaysian position. The law puts a duty upon a person in a position of trust and confidence, duty to speak and disclose all relevant information to the person reposing trust and confidence in him in any transaction between them. Intriguingly, according to Nuran Karim and Imitas Muhammad, the common practice of jurisprudential treatment of misrepresentation omits silence as a nullifying factor. Silence is, however, in Malaysia, treated as misrepresentation in contract. In addition, Stovall commented that no statement is imputed to a man who keeps silence, but silence is tantamount to a statement where there is an absolute necessity for speech. That is to say, it may not be to say that the person who keeps silence has made such and such a statement, but he keeps silence where he ought to have made a statement. Such silence is regarded as an admission and a statement. Unlike the English law, the common law, Malaysia has a Contract Act 1950 which provides statutory provision whether there was a duty for either party to reveal imperative information in the process of concluding a contract. Illustration under Section 70.
I am going to discuss on Section 70 of the Contracts Act 1950 and the duty to speak. In this provision, it stated that fraud includes any of the following acts committed by a party to a contract with the intent to deceive another party to induce him to conclude into a contract. The provision did not stop there because under subsection B, it suggests an active concealment of a fact by one having knowledge or belief of the fact. In subsection D of the provision, the word deceive contains the element of manipulation and the silence of any facts that are vital to the conclusion of a contract. It will fit the understanding of fraud in the act itself. A case that could be analogous to the rule would be Lau He Ti and Hardale Engineering Syndrome Berhad. The fact of this case is that the appellant alleged that the respondent failed to disclose to him that the loader had met with the accident. However, one Hamza J dismissed the appellant's claim and on appeal, the former federal court upheld the court's decision. Under the explanation of subsection 17 of the Act, there was no active duty on the part of the first respondent to inform the appellant of the year of the manufacture of the machine and the fact that it has been involved in a minor accident in a previous demonstration. These two matters were not material in the sense that non-disclosure was not intended to deceive the appellant or to induce him to enter the hire purchase transaction. Subsequently, we are going to talk about the duty to speak, having regard to the relationship of trust and confidence. For example, a father owes a duty to speak and to disclose all relevant information to his younger daughter in the transaction. Although the Act gave only one example, it can be safely understood to refer that all those relationships of trust and confidence, as previously discussed in the cases of undue influence under Section 16(2) and B of the Act. In Lim Kim Hua and Ho Chu Lan, the plaintiff was an old illiterate woman with poor memory and suffering from some form of senility. She was living with the first defendant, her granddaughter, who provided her with food and accommodation. The plaintiff entrusted the management of her house to the first defendant and was dependent on her in both her physical and financial needs. In 1983, the plaintiff made a will going a half share of the shop house to the first defendant's son, her great-grandson, and the 1/6 of the share each of the other half of the another 3 grandchildren. In 1984, she executed a memorandum of transfer, transferring a half share of the shop house to the first defendant's son. In 1984, she executed another memorandum of transfer, transferring the remaining half share in favor of the first defendant and another grandchild at a quarter share each. The plaintiff brought an action for a declaration that the 2 memoranda of transfers were null and void. Steve Shin J held that in these circumstances of the case, there was a duty, at least a moral duty on the part of the first defendant to lay down all the facts and information before the plaintiff so that the latter could, within limits of her mental capacity, determine what she wanted to do with her property. The first defendant had custody of the 1983 will and was fully aware of the provisions therein at the time of the execution of the second memorandum of transfer in her favour. She did not disclose the existence of this will nor its provisions to the plaintiff. Had she told the plaintiff that under the 1983 will, she had already provided the first defendant's son half share of the shophouse, and that subsequently in 1984 had transferred the said half share to him by way of gift. It was conceivable that the plaintiff, realizing that the first defendant's family was amply provided for, might not have gone through with the execution of the second memorandum of transfer in her favour in 1985. The first defendant was fully aware of these facts, had deliberately withheld such vital information from the plaintiff, information which she was bound to disclose, having regard to the close relationship between them and the trust and confidence response in her by the plaintiff. There was a concealment of material facts by the first defendant. This is a clear manifestation of dishonesty, establishing fraud against her. The court held that the second memorandum of transfer in favour of the first defendant was now en void. Unfortunately, the court did not refer to the explanation of Section 17 of the Act that deals with fraud by silence.
One area in need for reform is contract made in uberina fide, utmost good faith. Under insurance contract, before legislation intervened, it was hard to say whether insurance contract was meaningfully made in uttermost good faith. New legislation which were created based on suggestions of the Law Commission and the Scottish Law Commission made new provisions on how insurance contracts should be made. The Law Commission and the Scottish Law Commission retain the obligation to volunteer relevant information for all insured who are not consumers. However, the Insurance Act 2015 also includes new provision relevant to the duty of disclosure. The duty to disclosure to make a fair representation of risk incorporates both the law on non-disclosure and representation. The duty also includes waiver provisions similar to those of the Marine Insurance Act 1906, and the insured will have complied with the duty to make a fair presentation if it has provided enough information to put underwriter on notice to ask further questions. Additionally, the Act gives some guidance on how information must be disclosed and who must provide it. The new duty recognizes that gathering information in large organizations involves a lot of processes and aims to recognize the impact of information technology. The duty of disclosure deals with both the substance of the information provided and its form. The insured must disclose all material circumstances which it knows or ought to know. Failing that, provide sufficient information to put the underwriter on notice to ask further questions. Other reforms which should be made is that of fiduciary relationship. Under English law, fiduciary relationship is not defined. The court should define it more clear.
Now looking at Australia. Australia has attempted to reduce the harsh effects of the duty of utmost good faith by applying the doctrine of proportionality. The doctrine can manifest itself in two ways, either by proportionately reducing the amount of the claim or by increasing the amount of the premium in proportion to the loss claimed. Thus, the insurer remains liable but is not obliged to pay amounts which it would not have paid had the assured disclosed certain material facts. Proportionate remedies should be made available to reflect the change to the policy or premium that would have occurred, had there been a proper disclosure. However, in the case of fraudulent non-disclosure, where the insurer consent is truly vitiated, avoidance may be justified. Reform should aim to create the right incentives for both the insurers and the insured. Insured should be required to disclose information that a reasonable insured in their position would consider relevant and material to the risk they want insured. Insurers should be incentivized to ask the questions they know they need to answer and to ask follow-up questions if required. These are the proposed reforms to the duty of disclosure, whereby I looked at both the UK position and Australian position. Thank you.
Despite the general presumption that there is no duty to disclose, there exist exceptions in both English and Malaysian law that allow one party to the contract to claim for misrepresentation in a situation where the other party fails to disclose material facts. However, it is clear that certain exceptions do not adequately balance the interests of both parties to the contract, such as contracts made in uberrima fide under insurance contracts. The case of Bank Financier de la Cité SA and Westgate Insurance Company Limited, where the law clearly favored the insurer over the insured despite the inequity of the case, shows that this area requires reform. Besides that, both jurisdictions require full disclosure in cases where there is a fiduciary relationship, as in English law, and a relationship of trust and confidence, as in Malaysian law. However, the scope and limit to this has not been well defined, and this has led to some confusion in both jurisdictions. In conclusion, the law on duty of disclosure still requires future development, as at present, contract law seems to neglect fairness in favor of preserving the notion that parties should have the ability to bargain to obtain the best terms which they can for themselves.
This is that ice cold Michelle fight for that white gold. This one for them hood girls, them good girls, straight masterpieces. Stylin', wildin', living it up in the city. Got Chuck's on with Saint Laurent. Gotta kiss myself, I'm so pretty. I'm too hot. Call the police and the fireman. I'm too hot. Make a dragon wanna retire, man. I'm too hot. Say my name, you know who I am. I'm too hot. And my band bought that money. Break it down. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah.